There are people whose lives seem to contain an unreasonable number of coincidences. They meet someone at a dinner party who introduces them to someone else, who eventually offers them a job they didn't know existed. They start learning Spanish or ceramics, or how to code months before. An opportunity requiring exactly that skill appears out of nowhere. They send an email they almost deleted. They attend an event they nearly skipped because they were tired. They move to a new city for one reason and discover something entirely different waiting for them there. Years later, when they tell the story of how any of it happened, there is always a moment where they pause and say, "I just got lucky." And perhaps they did. But after hearing enough of these stories, we question, why does luck seem to keep happening to certain people? This happens often enough that you start wondering whether the question we should be asking is not, "How do I become lucky?" but something slightly different. What kind of life gives luck more opportunities to happen? This is a difficult question because human beings are excellent storytellers and terrible witnesses to randomness. Once something works, once the job appears, once the relationship begins, once the business succeeds, we construct a narrative around it. This happened because I worked hard, because I believed in myself, because I took the risk, because I followed my intuition, because I refused to give up. But the uncomfortable truth is that thousands of other people may have worked just as hard, believed just as deeply, taken similar risks, followed similar instincts, and received entirely different outcomes. We study the novelist whose manuscript was discovered. We rarely study everyone who wrote with equal dedication and whose work was never read. We interview the entrepreneur whose strange idea became a company. We don't hear much from the 100 others who tried something equally strange in the same year and failed quietly. This is what researchers call survivorship bias. And it matters here because an essay about luck can very easily become cruel. It can slip into implying that successful people somehow created their good fortune and unsuccessful people simply failed to. That would be a convenient story. It would make the world feel more controllable. But it would also be a lie. Chance is real. Privilege is real. Timing is real. Birth itself is perhaps the first lottery any human being enters. Where you are born, to whom, with what body, under what government, during what historical period, with what resources? These things dramatically shape the possibilities available to us before intention even enters the story. So, get lucky on purpose cannot mean control your destiny. It must mean something more modest and perhaps more interesting. Imagine two people who both dream of becoming writers. One writes privately for 10 years, working on a novel in absolute solitude, never showing anyone, never publishing anything imperfect, waiting until the work is ready. The other also writes privately, but occasionally submits an essay to a small magazine, attends a writing workshop, speaks to other writers, publishes imperfect work online, enters competitions she doesn't win, emails editors who sometimes don't respond, and tells people at parties what she's working on even though it makes her feel vulnerable. Neither of these people can control whether an editor loves their work. Neither can control who reads it, or what the publishing industry wants that particular year, or whether their story resonates with the right person at the right time. The arrival of opportunity remains fundamentally unpredictable for both of them. But their exposure to fortunate accidents is not identical. One has created a single point at which something unexpected could happen, the moment she finally submits the completed manuscript. The other has created dozens. Every submission, every conversation, every workshop, every imperfect essay. Each one is a door through which luck might enter, even though most of them will open onto nothing at all. There's a concept that appears in discussions of entrepreneurship and creativity, sometimes called luck surface area. The idea that the more meaningful things you do and the more people who know about those things, the greater the number of possible intersections between your work and opportunity. But we should be careful with this. It's a useful metaphor, not a law of nature. Luck has not become controllable. The number of doors through which it might arrive has simply increased. And this brings us to something more interesting than luck alone: serendipity. The word comes from an old Persian fairy tale about three princes from Serendip who were always making discoveries, by accident and wisdom, of things they were not looking for. What makes serendipity different from simple luck is that it involves an accidental discovery combined with the ability to recognize its significance. Many famous stories contain this pattern. Alexander Fleming returned from vacation to find that one of his bacterial cultures had been contaminated by mold. That was an accident. Accidents happen in laboratories constantly, but Fleming noticed that the bacteria near the mold had died, and he understood that this was scientifically interesting. The contamination was luck. Recognizing what the contamination meant required years of preparation. The accident alone was insufficient. This introduces a deeper idea. Preparation does not cause luck. Preparation changes what you are capable of seeing when luck appears. Two people can encounter the same information and experience entirely different opportunities because one has developed the knowledge necessary to recognize what is in front of them. Perhaps this is why certain opportunities seem completely invisible until we become capable of understanding them. The conversation means nothing because you don't yet understand the industry. The opportunity passes because you've never practiced the skill. The idea appears, but you lack the vocabulary to recognize what you've discovered. Years later, after learning more, you encounter something similar and suddenly think, there it is. Louis Pasteur once wrote that chance favors the prepared mind, and the phrase has been repeated so many times it risks becoming meaningless. But if we resist turning it into a motivational slogan and actually interrogate it, something interesting appears. Preparation cannot summon chance. No amount of studying will make the contaminated Petri dish appear. But chance arriving before preparation can look remarkably similar to nothing happening at all. Perhaps luck sometimes exists before we become capable of recognizing it. Now let's shift from preparation to exposure, because they are not the same thing. Some people live highly predictable lives. Same people, same environments, same routines, same information sources, same conversations, same routes through the city. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. Predictability can be peaceful. It can be safe. It can allow depth rather than breadth. But predictability also reduces randomness. And randomness is where many unexpected opportunities originate. Think about what happens when someone occasionally accepts invitations outside their normal pattern, travels somewhere unfamiliar, learns something unrelated to their career, talks to someone outside their industry, takes a different route home, reads outside their usual ideology, attends the strange event, starts the unnecessary project, sends the email even though they're not sure it's appropriate, publishes the imperfect thing even though it makes them anxious. Not because every action will produce something useful, most will not, and that's important. Getting lucky on purpose requires tolerating an enormous amount of nothing happening. The person whose 47th email changed her career still sent 46 emails that didn't. The founder whose strange weekend experiment became a company probably tried ideas nobody remembers. The person who met the love of his life at a friend's dinner party attended dozens of dinner parties where he simply ate dinner and went home. Luck often becomes visible only retrospectively. Before the lucky event, the behavior may look inefficient, pointless, embarrassing, unnecessary. Why are you learning that? Why are you going there? Why are you talking to them? Why are you making this? Why are you applying when you're clearly underqualified? Why are you trying again? And this introduces an important characteristic of people who appear lucky. Perhaps they are unusually willing to perform actions whose usefulness cannot yet be justified. The psychologist Richard Wiseman spent years studying people who considered themselves particularly lucky or unlucky, trying to understand whether their lives actually contained different amounts of good fortune or whether something else was happening. What he found was not that lucky people possessed magical powers, but that they tended to behave differently in ways that increased their exposure to unexpected possibilities. They were often more open to new experiences, more socially connected, more attentive to unexpected information, less rigidly focused on a single, predetermined outcome. In one of his experiments, he gave people a newspaper and asked them to count the photographs inside. Hidden halfway through the newspaper was a message in enormous text that read, "Stop counting. There are 43 photographs in this newspaper." Many of the people who considered themselves unlucky missed it entirely because they were too focused on the task. Many of the people who considered themselves lucky noticed it immediately. The experiment is not proof that luck is purely psychological. But it does suggest something important. Attention changes what becomes available to us. If you enter every situation looking exclusively for one thing, you may walk directly past something better. This is the problem with extreme goal fixation. Goals help organize behavior. They give us direction. But rigid attachment to one specific outcome can make us incapable of recognizing opportunities that arrive in unfamiliar forms. You wanted one particular career, one particular city, one particular relationship, one particular version of success. Then something appears that doesn't resemble the plan, and because it doesn't resemble the plan, you dismiss it. There's a tension here between goal-directed behavior and exploratory behavior. A life optimized entirely for efficiency leaves very little room for discovery. There must be some wandering, some intellectual detours, some conversations without agendas, some books that have nothing to do with what you're supposed to be learning, some projects that cannot immediately justify themselves. Perhaps curiosity is one of the quiet architectures of luck. But let's talk about relationships, because many of the most consequential opportunities in human lives arrive through other people. A recommendation, an introduction, a conversation, someone remembering your name when an opportunity appears, someone forwarding an article because they thought of you. In the 1970s, the sociologist Mark Granovetter studied how people found jobs and discovered something counterintuitive. Often, the most valuable leads came not from close friends, but from acquaintances. People they saw occasionally, but weren't particularly close to. He called this the strength of weak ties. The logic is strange, but makes sense once you think about it. Our closest relationships often inhabit similar informational worlds. Your best friends probably know many of the same people you know, read similar things, work in similar fields. But acquaintances move through different networks. The former colleague you run into once a year, the person you met once at a conference, the friend of a friend, the woman you occasionally speak to at the gym. These weaker connections can become bridges into information and opportunities unavailable within your immediate circle. And this is why letting parts of your curiosity become visible matters. There is a strange disadvantage to doing meaningful things completely invisibly. People cannot recommend you for something they don't know you can do. They cannot send opportunities related to interests you've never mentioned. They cannot connect you with someone who shares an ambition you keep secret. This doesn't mean broadcasting every goal to everyone. It doesn't mean turning relationships into transactional networking, which would be both morally repellent and practically ineffective. It means something simpler. Talk about what you're building, what you're studying, what fascinates you, what problem you're trying to solve. Sometimes opportunity begins with an extraordinarily ordinary sentence. Actually, I know someone you should talk to. There's a concept from computer science and decision theory called the exploration-exploitation trade-off. Life constantly presents a tension. Do you continue using what already works? The restaurant you already love, the career where you have expertise, the familiar social circle? Or do you explore something that might work better? Somewhere new, an emerging field you barely understand, a different community. Exploitation provides reliability. You know what you're getting. Exploration provides discovery. You might find something better, or you might waste your time. Too much exploration creates chaos. You never develop depth in anything. Too much exploitation creates stagnation. You miss everything happening outside your narrow focus. Perhaps Lucky Lives contains some deliberate percentage of exploration, not reckless reinvention every 6 months, simply enough unfamiliarity for new information to enter. And one of the most reliable forms of exploration is learning something new, even when, especially when, you're terrible at it. One reason adults become less exposed to serendipity is that competence makes life narrower. Once you know what you're good at, there is enormous incentive to remain there. Being a beginner threatens identity. It's uncomfortable. It makes you slow and confused in a world that rewards speed and certainty. But beginnerhood places you in unfamiliar rooms, around unfamiliar people, asking unfamiliar questions, making unfamiliar mistakes. Perhaps learning something new is valuable even when the skill itself never becomes directly useful, because learning changes your network, your vocabulary, your attention, your understanding of what's possible. The guitar lessons might never matter professionally. The coding class might. The language class might introduce a friend. The friend might recommend a book. The book might produce an idea. The idea might become something you could never have planned from the beginning. Lives are non-linear systems. Small inputs occasionally produce enormous consequences. And this is where things become genuinely strange. Some of the largest events in our lives can be traced backward through absurd chains of tiny, seemingly meaningless decisions. You took the job because you met someone at a specific event. You met them because you attended something you almost skipped. You attended because another plan was cancelled. The cancellation happened because someone was sick. Remove one tiny event, and an entire future disappears. Our lives contain countless invisible forks. We rarely know which ordinary Tuesday will eventually become part of the explanation for everything that followed. And perhaps this is another reason to participate in life rather than merely optimize it. You cannot know which experiences will become consequential while you are living them. But now, we need to complicate everything again, because not everyone can maximize exposure equally. Exploration costs money. Travel costs money. Unpaid internships require financial support. Starting businesses requires resources or access to credit. Moving to where opportunities concentrate requires wealth. Failure is cheaper when there is somewhere safe to fall. A wealthy person and a poor person taking the same risk are often not taking the same risk at all. Networks themselves are unequally distributed. Geography determines access, passports determine mobility, race and gender, and class and disability and family responsibilities, and political stability and education, and inherited wealth influence, which doors even exist. Therefore, we can never allow "get lucky on purpose" to mutate into the claim that anyone can achieve anything if they just create enough opportunities. That would turn probability into morality. It would suggest that people who struggle have simply failed to expose themselves to enough chance, when the actual explanation might be that the structures around them have systematically reduced the opportunities available. We begin with different amounts of luck. We possess different capacities to risk what we have. Agency exists, but never in a vacuum, and sometimes there is no lesson. Sometimes bad luck is just bad luck. Businesses fail despite excellent execution. People become ill. Jobs disappear because of decisions made in distant boardrooms. Relationships end. Accidents happen. History interrupts individual plans in ways no amount of preparation or networking or curiosity could have prevented. The desire to believe we control luck partly comes from our discomfort with how vulnerable we actually are. If everything happens for a reason, if every success can be traced to behavior and every failure to insufficient effort, then randomness becomes less frightening. But perhaps maturity requires accepting that some things happen without asking what we deserved. This makes intentional luck more meaningful, not less, because we are not trying to dominate uncertainty. We are learning how to participate in a world that will always contain it. So perhaps a person who gets lucky on purpose does not wake every morning hunting opportunities. Perhaps their life simply has certain characteristics. They remain curious beyond immediate usefulness. They develop skills before knowing exactly where those skills will lead. They allow their work to be visible. They maintain relationships without demanding those relationships produce anything. They occasionally enter unfamiliar rooms. They tolerate rejection. They experiment. They wander. They notice. They prepare. And most importantly, they understand that none of this guarantees anything. They are not controlling luck. They are creating more possible futures. Let's return to the people from the beginning whose lives seemed impossibly lucky. Perhaps when they say, "I just got lucky," we should believe them. Maybe they really did. The phone call could have gone to someone else. The person at the dinner party could have sat somewhere different. The email could have arrived on a day when the recipient was too busy to read it. The contaminated petri dish could have been thrown away by someone less attentive. But perhaps there is another sentence hiding underneath. I was there. I noticed. I had spent years becoming capable of doing something with what appeared. Perhaps this is the strange bargain we make with chance. We cannot tell it when to arrive. We cannot tell it what to bring. We cannot guarantee that it will knock at all. But we can build more doors. We can become curious enough to open some of them, prepared enough to recognize what stands behind them, and courageous enough to walk through when the destination is unclear. There are futures that will never happen unless something accidental occurs. A person you haven't met, a place you haven't visited, an idea you haven't encountered, a skill you haven't learned, a conversation you cannot schedule because you don't yet know that you need to have it. You cannot plan these things. That is precisely the point. You can only construct a life in which there are enough encounters, enough experiments, enough curiosity, enough preparation, enough movement for the unexpected to occasionally find you. And then, years later, when someone asks how any of it happened, perhaps the explanation will sound disappointingly simple. You will look backward at the strange sequence of accidents that became your life and say, "I got lucky," and you will be telling the truth, just not all of it.